After Aurelian, known as the restorer of the world, managed to reunite the fragmented Roman Empire and restore its former glory, his sudden and tragic death plunged the state into another abyss of instability. This fatal event was followed by only a brief reign by Tacitus, and soon the Eternal City once again found itself on the precipice, threatened by complete disintegration. The empire, exhausted by decades of crisis, desperately needed a new leader whose valor could rival Aurelian's might, not only to inherit his great legacy but also to steadfastly maintain the momentum of revival he had so brilliantly initiated. As if by fate, such a leader indeed appeared on the horizon, Probus, one of Aurelian's most trusted and capable generals. Ancient chronicles and historical accounts unanimously affirm that Probus was in no way inferior to his great predecessor in military art and command prowess. Moreover, his contemporaries particularly noted his superiority in virtue, emphasizing the mercy and justice of his nature. The famous historian Zosimus, among others, lavishly praised Probus, calling him an outstanding and truly just ruler. But how did this man, whose name was yet to be inscribed in golden letters in the annals of Rome, ascend to the pinnacle of power? The story of Marcus Aurelius Probus's rise begins on August 19, approximately 232 AD, in the picturesque city of Sirmium, located in Lower Pannonia. However, details of his family origin, so crucial for understanding the future emperor's personality, remain surprisingly scarce and shrouded in mystery. Some sources cautiously suggest his father was a humble farmer, while others, on the contrary, propose he might have belonged to the military class and been an officer. One of the few sources shedding light on his early career is the Historia Augusta, a compilation that historians traditionally treat with a certain degree of skepticism due to its not always verifiable data. Nevertheless, this work particularly highlights Probus's outstanding valor as a tribune, when he bravely crossed the Danubian frontiers during the bloody Scythian War. For his exceptional services on the battlefield, he was awarded numerous honors, attesting to his extraordinary talent. According to the same document, Emperor Valerian, whose discerning eye skillfully recognized talent, noticed young Probus's potential unusually early and appointed him as the first commander of a certain Legion III Felix. This title remains a mystery to researchers, as no corroborating records of such a legion's existence in the Roman armies have been found, only adding intrigue to his early biography. Subsequently, under Emperor Gallienus, Probus was entrusted with one of the most responsible assignments, command of all armies stationed on the Balkan Peninsula, which further confirmed his rapid and deserved promotion through the ranks. During Emperor Aurelian's reign, Probus's career rapidly developed, and his responsibilities significantly expanded when he was entrusted with the command of the valiant Legion. Notably, numerous accounts from that era indicate Aurelian's particular favor towards Probus, as evidenced, for example, by the crucial naval mission to return Egypt to Roman control, assigned to him during the Palmyrene War. After the successful completion of this campaign, Probus was immediately dispatched to the strategically important Rhine region as soon as the Gallic Empire was reintegrated into the vast Roman Empire. Historical chronicles even convey suggestions that Probus played a key role in tempering some of Aurelian's harsher and, at times, more ruthless tendencies. In subsequent events, it was Tacitus, Aurelian's successor, who bestowed great honor upon Probus by appointing him to the crucial position of overseeing the entire Eastern Command, a testament to his outstanding abilities and trust. After the sudden and tragic death of Tacitus, which shook the Roman world, speculation regarding the identity of the next potential leader undoubtedly began to circulate wildly among the soldiers. At this tense moment, one officer, a fervent supporter of Probus's candidacy, loudly exclaimed to the gathered crowd, "We need an emperor who embodies strength, justice, humility, compassion, and honesty." This prophetic statement gained particular significance because the Latin term for moral integrity and virtue is probus. Perceiving this astonishing coincidence as nothing less than a sign from above, the soldiers, seized by a unified impulse, immediately took up the cry, echoing in unison, "Probus is the one we need." Thus, thanks to a confluence of circumstances and the symbolic meaning of his name, Probus was put forward for the highest office. Taking advantage of the situation, a certain general accepted the support expressed to him, donning the symbolic purple robes. He proclaimed himself the legitimate successor to Tacitus, thereby disputing Florian's claim to the throne. However, the historical veracity of this claim remains a subject of debate and lacks unequivocal confirmation. After Tacitus's death, his half-brother Florian ascended the imperial throne, but his reign proved to be extremely brief. By 276 AD, Probus, commanding the Roman legions on the empire's eastern frontiers, was proclaimed emperor by his loyal soldiers, inevitably leading him to a direct confrontation with Florian. The forces of the two rival emperors clashed in a decisive battle in Cilicia, where the overwhelming numerical superiority of Probus's army and his undeniable reputation as an outstanding military strategist tipped the scales in his favor. Realizing the hopelessness of his situation and the inevitability of defeat, Florian's own soldiers turned against him, resulting in his assassination. Once Florian was removed from the political arena, the Roman Senate readily recognized Probus as the new emperor in the second half of that same year, 276. Probus, being a shrewd politician, consistently demonstrated at least formal respect for the Senate, a far-sighted strategy that not only strengthened his personal position as ruler but also earned him the admiration of subsequent Latin scholars. He commenced his duties in his first consulship in 277, following established traditions. As the famous Historia Augusta recounts, Probus, according to widespread rumors, avenged Aurelian's death by luring the surviving assassins to a meticulously organized feast, then signaling his bodyguards for a sudden attack and annihilation, a scenario strikingly reminiscent of the infamous Red Wedding from the fantasy saga Game of Thrones. The reliability of this dramatic account raises serious doubts. However, if true, it indicates that the conspiracy against Aurelian was either extremely well planned or Aurelian's list of enemies was extensive and included many individuals. Curiously, the participants of this fateful banquet apparently did not recognize each other, which might have warned them of their impending doom. The same historical source indicates that Probus indeed avenged the deaths of both Aurelian and Tacitus by hunting down and executing their murderers, yet he showed surprising leniency towards those who had once supported Florian. The Byzantine historian Zonaras confirms Probus's actions, particularly emphasizing his decisive retribution against those guilty of the emperor's murders. From all this, it can be concluded that Probus sought to firmly and mercilessly suppress any attempts on the lives of reigning emperors, thereby setting a harsh precedent. On the throne. It was likely Probus's difficult task to deal with the remaining barbarian tribes rampaging in Asia Minor, after Tacitus and Florian had already taken their steps. By 277 AD, his military successes were duly recognized with the honorary title, Gothicus Maximus. Taking full control of the vast empire, Probus immediately began forming a formidable army to decisively repel the Franks and Alemanni threatening Gaul. It is worth noting that Tacitus had previously neglected these serious threats, being entirely preoccupied with military operations in the east, in Asia Minor. Gaul by then was in a state of deep desolation and chaos, with numerous wandering barbarian detachments plundering the lands at will and seizing many cities. It is not surprising that many inhabitants may have longed for the stable leadership provided by Postumus and his successors from the Gallic Empire. Although these uninvited raiders had already begun to retreat, carrying their plunder with them, Probus, unwilling to let them go unpunished, sent his generals and legions in pursuit. The barbarian invasion had so devastated these lands that food became catastrophically scarce for everyone without exception, for the locals, for the invaders themselves, and even for the Roman legions. However, against this grim backdrop, something truly miraculous happened for Probus. A sudden and powerful gust of wind brought not only long-awaited rain but also grain. This extraordinary grain, once baked, transformed into perfectly edible loaves of bread. Roman forces successfully repelled the last wave of Frankish attacks, and as a result of a prolonged year-long campaign, they captured the chief of the Lugii tribe along with his son. Only after the Frankish tribes fulfilled the conditions, releasing their captives and returning the seized goods, were they granted the right to withdraw unhindered. General Probus, taking the reins of the legions that had gained fame in defeating the Alemanni, introduced an unusual but effective reward system in Gaul. Each warrior who presented a barbarian head received an aureus, a gold coin. At the same time, other Germanic peoples, namely the Burgundians and Vandals, poured into Rhaetia in vast numbers. Their goal was to reinforce the Franks, and they significantly outnumbered the troops under Probus's command. The emperor, displaying extraordinary strategic acumen, skillfully cornered the barbarian hordes by a riverbank, resorting to cunning tactical provocations. Legionaries cleverly lured small detachments of barbarians to cross the water barrier, where each such detachment was methodically annihilated. Ultimately, a significant portion of the barbarian formations requested a peace treaty, offering to return all captured loot in exchange for their kinsmen held in Roman captivity. However, when it became clear that the Germanic tribes had not fulfilled their part of the deal by not returning Roman captives, an enraged Probus immediately launched a devastating counterattack, which resulted in a brutal and bloody clash. As a result of this victory, he subjugated 9 tribal chiefs, and 16,000 German warriors were forcibly integrated into the ranks of the Roman army. These newly arrived recruits were prudently quartered at a significant distance from the Rhenish frontiers. Reflecting on the events, Probus uttered his famous phrase, "A Roman would prefer to see barbarian allies in battle, rather than simply observe their presence." Probus, an outstanding commander and ruler, triumphantly restored full control over the territories of the Rhine and Upper Danube, earning him the honorary title, Germanicus Maximus. Under his decisive command, the Franks were decisively pushed out of northern Gaul, the Alemanni out of central Gaul, and the Burgundians and Vandals found themselves forced to retreat from both Rhaetia and the Balkans. These impressive military successes led to a significant strengthening of positions in the regions east of the Rhine, which apparently contributed to the creation of a reliable defensive line against possible aggressive incursions by barbarian tribes. Eastern Campaign. Diplomatic and military issues between the Roman Empire and Persia, initiated by Aurelian, remained unresolved at the time of his death. Although direct evidence of his final plans for a campaign against the Sassanids is lacking, the presence of Probus and Tacitus in the east at the time of Aurelian's death clearly indicated preparations for a large-scale military operation. However, upon ascending the imperial throne, Probus likely deemed it necessary to postpone a full-scale invasion of Persia. This decision was dictated both by the uncertainty of his own political position and the urgent need to confront immediate threats from barbarian tribes invading Gaul. By 279, the situation had significantly changed, and Probus deemed it timely and necessary to direct his forces to the east. To the existing difficulties was added the appearance of a new usurper on the political scene, further exacerbating the general instability of the period. A characteristic example of the turbulent instability of that time is the story of Saturninus, an ethnic Moor who was once a trusted ally and comrade of Probus himself. Holding the post of governor of Syria and enjoying significant influence in Egypt, Saturninus was proclaimed emperor in Antioch around 278. This event occurred amidst serious unrest in the strategically important grain-producing region, and the imperial title conferred upon him was also supported in Egypt. Saturninus, realizing the inevitability of impending danger and convinced that his fate was sealed regardless of his actions, accepted the imperial title offered to him. However, as Probus, whose formidable troops were known for their might, steadily advanced, the supporters of the rebellion began to realize the fatal error of their ways. Ironically, those who had elevated him to the throne ultimately took his life, executing their own leader. A serious problem gripped the region when a group of bandits fortified themselves in a mountain stronghold known as Carnus, located north of Lycia in the Isaurian region of southern Asia Minor. Zosimus's chronicles offer an exhaustive and detailed description of these dramatic events. As the Roman general Probus steadily advanced, Lydius, the ruthless bandit leader who had long terrorized the provinces of Pamphylia and Lycia, was forced to seek refuge within the impregnable walls of Carnus. Faced with a determined Roman siege, Lydius resorted to extreme measures. He ordered the destruction of buildings within the fortified city to clear land for cultivation to ensure food supply. However, with a large population to feed, he made the cruel decision to expel all whom he deemed secondary or an excessive burden. In response, demonstrating tactical insight, the Romans skillfully directed these exiles back into Carnus, thereby exacerbating the supply problem for the besieged. In a desperate attempt to provision the besieged, Lydius ordered an underground tunnel to be dug, but Roman troops quickly discovered this passage and immediately sealed it, cutting off the only path to salvation. Amidst escalating famine and a desire to conserve the remaining meager supplies, Lydius issued a monstrous order, to execute everyone he considered unnecessary ballast. Such a ruthless decision was not well received by his men, leading to one of his most skilled archers deciding to desert and defect to the Romans. Using his extensive knowledge of Lydius's daily routine and habits, this defector actively collaborated with the Romans. With his help, using a powerful long-range projectile machine known as a scorpion, the Romans were able to deliver a decisive blow, striking and killing Lydius himself. Despite his leader's last dying calls for steadfastness and defiance, the surviving bandits, deprived of their leader and in a hopeless situation, soon followed his death, surrendering to Roman forces. Thus, the region of Isauria was finally liberated from one of the most serious and long-standing threats that had loomed over it. With the aim of ensuring security and strengthening influence in the strategically important region, Emperor Probus took a far-sighted step by establishing a colony there, composed of his loyal veterans. Historical chronicles, particularly the Historia Augusta, not only confirmed but also detailed the events described by Zosimus, especially noting Probus's significant encounter with the leader of the Isaurian brigands. After resolving local issues, Probus continued his military march, heading east towards the Syrian lands. At the same time, while Probus advanced, the southern territories of Egypt came under threat. They faced a massive invasion by the warlike Blemmyes tribes, and the city of Thapsus, located on the banks of the Nile, was gripped by serious internal unrest. Fortunately for Roman order, the local regional governor proved exceptionally effective, managing to completely suppress these disturbances and restore calm even before Emperor Probus reached the area. By that time, one of the key adversaries, Saturninus, had already met his end. However, regarding the circumstances of his demise, historical sources present conflicting versions. The Historia Augusta asserts that Probus, aware of Saturninus's rebellious situation, immediately dispatched a detachment to eliminate him. At the same time, Zosimus offers a different interpretation, insisting that Saturninus was killed by his own supporters before Probus had the opportunity to personally eliminate this threat. Faced with a series of numerous difficulties and unforeseen obstacles during his prolonged